Okay, let's dive right into this explainer, where we're investigating a viral internet mystery that takes us all the way to the literal bottom of the world. If you've ever spent time just idly scrolling around the globe on your phone, there's a good chance you might have stumbled across something highly unusual down at the South Pole. So today we're putting on our digital detective hats to figure out exactly why the world's most advanced mapping technology seems to just completely break down when it looks in Antarctica. Our mystery actually kicks off with a totally puzzled Reddit user. They were just zooming around the Antarctic landscape on Google Earth, and instead of seeing that smooth, endless expanse of white snow and blue oceans we'd expect, they were hit with this bizarre, glitchy, multicolored patchwork of sharp rectangles. We're talking blocks tinted bright green, others yellow, some deep navy, and a bunch that were just flat, muddy gray. Naturally confused, they posted a screenshot and simply asked, "Why all the colors?" And, well, the internet did what the internet does best, right? The thread immediately flooded with wild, highly creative, and entirely baseless conspiracy theories. People were confidently proclaiming that the different colors were hiding secret military bases. Others joked that the glitches were intentionally placed to cover up ice giants, alien pyramids, or, my personal favorite, the gigantic ice wall holding back the White Walkers. One user even threw out the idea of secret snow farming. Honestly, a fantastic display of human imagination, but not exactly helpful for finding the truth.
So, moving on to part one, the Google Earth mystery. To actually solve this case, we have to separate all that myth from reality. Fortunately, buried under the jokes about ice giants, one rational user kind of hit the nail on the head. They pointed out that Google Earth doesn't just take one giant seamless photograph of the planet. Instead, it stitches millions of individual images taken by different satellites together. And, as they perfectly hypothesized, the system for doing that just isn't well optimized for an extreme environment like Antarctica. The map is basically a massive digital quilt, and a pretty poorly optimized one at that. Let's look at part two, trouble with polar satellites.
Let's zoom out into space for a second to see why taking pictures of the Earth's poles is such an absolute nightmare. The reality of satellite mapping is that it's fundamentally biased toward where people actually live. Standard equatorial orbits are highly common. They pass over populated continents all the time, giving us continuous, seamless coverage with nice, consistent lighting. Polar satellite orbits, on the other hand, incredibly rare. The Earth is constantly rotating beneath them. Plus, the Antarctica is pitch dark half the year and covered by dense clouds the rest of the time. This means companies like Google can't just pull from a steady stream of perfect pictures. They're forced to buy sparse, imperfect imagery and forcefully stitch it all together. And then we have to talk about the camera hardware itself. To compensate for the blindingly bright, low-contrast ice, these satellite sensors use something called a Bayer filter. Think about it. When a camera looks at miles of featureless white snow, it basically panics. It desperately tries to white balance by multiplying pixel values, just trying to find detail where there literally is none. Now, because a Bayer filter has twice as many green sensors as red or blue, this overcompensation unintentionally adds fake green, yellow, or blue tints to the final image. That right there is what leaves those bizarre, vividly colored blocks on your map.
All right, part three, remote sensing in Antarctica.
To truly understand how this glitch happens on a micro level, we need to bring in the real forensic experts here, remote sensing scientists. And this brilliantly illustrates our scientific crime scene. This is Admiralty Bay on King George Island. Researchers recently set up an intensive study here to understand how glacial meltwater behaves, and, crucially for our mystery, they wanted to see just how difficult it is to photograph that water from the sky. Now, instead of relying on those distant, glitchy satellites passing hundreds of miles overhead, these researchers took a much closer look. They actually flew automated high-tech drones incredibly low over the ice in coves. Their goal was to capture hyper-detailed digital surface models, or DSMs, of 6 different active glaciers. Flying at this low altitude meant they were capturing images with a crazy pixel resolution, right down to a few centimeters. Which leads us to part 4, how shadows deceive data. These high-tech drone flights uncovered a massive problem that perfectly explains the root cause of our Google Earth glitches. Shadows are literally destroying the data. The researchers found that when you measure clear water in the shade, even far from a glacier, the amount of radiation reflected in the green spectral band drops by a massive 50% compared to that exact same water out in the sunlight. In the near-infrared band, it drops by 42%. The camera effectively stops receiving accurate info about what's actually down there. Just look closely at this side-by-side comparison. The towering edge of the glacier casts this massive, long shadow over the surrounding cove.
Because the sun angle in Antarctica is so incredibly extreme, these shadows aren't just fleeting, they're practically permanent features of the landscape. They drastically alter the radiometry above the water, lowering the reflection signal so much that it creates a literal dark zone for the sensors. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. Notice how the shadow completely disrupts the satellite's vision here. As glacial meltwater flows out, it carries thick suspended sediments, creating these highly turbid plumes that scientists desperately need to track. But check out these transect charts. Once that sediment-filled water crosses the border into the shadow zone, the reflectance values just plummet. The camera is blinded, the water looks artificially dark and muddy, and all that bright sediment data is completely lost.
So, part 5, the pixel aggregation problem.
This is really the climax of our investigation. To force that super accurate drone data into a global satellite map, scientists have to use a process called pixel aggregation. Step 1. Capture the high-resolution data at a microscopic 15-centimeter scale. Step 2. Mathematically average, compress, and aggregate this incredibly nuanced data to match standard satellite resolutions like Landsat 8. Step 3. Output the data as massive, 30-meter wide blocks. Think of it like trying to summarize a beautifully detailed high-def photograph of a crowded room using just one single giant solid-colored block. You are going to lose all the detail.
And here is the undeniable visual proof. On the left, we have the highly detailed 15-centimeter drone resolution. You can see the intricate shadow lines, the chunks of floating ice, the varied textures of the water. It's beautiful. But on the right, that is the exact same patch of ice after it's been aggregated to a 30-meter satellite resolution. It turns into flat, ugly squares. The aggregation just completely destroys the physical reality of the landscape.
And here is the absolute nail in the coffin for our mystery. When scientists aggregate pixels over areas that are shallow or have cloudy water, or feature floating ice trapped in deep glacier shadows, the mathematical distortion is so severe, it triggers an error rate of over 100%. I mean, the math simply cannot reconcile bright white floating ice mixed with a pitch black shadow inside the exact same 30-meter block. The computer basically panics, gives up, and outputs a corrupted, bizarrely colored square.
Finally, part 6, science, not conspiracies.
So, bringing all this amazing forensic evidence back to our original internet mystery, one level-headed Reddit user really nailed it from the start. They said, poor stitching of various satellite images at a certain definition. And the science entirely backs this up. Nobody is hiding alien pyramids down there, and there's definitely no secret snow farming. What you're actually looking at is sparse polar satellite data, corrupted by massive glacier shadows, distorted by desperate camera filters overcompensating for bright snow, and mathematically mangled by aggregating intricate 15-centimeter realities into clumsy 30-meter digital blocks.
Ultimately, while the truth might not feature giant ice walls or military cover-ups, it is undeniably fascinating, right? It reveals the immense physical limitations of the technology we rely on every day. And it really leaves us wondering, as we scroll endlessly across our seamless digital maps, taking them as absolute truth, just how much of our digital world is merely a stitched-together illusion built from broken data. Definitely something to think about the next time you zoom in on an empty part of the map.